Welcome back to the City Current Radio Show. I'm your host, Jeremy Park. We're coming to you from our home studios, all of us, because once again, we want to make sure that you all are safe and healthy. That's the number one priority. So when you talk about the power of purpose, connecting nonprofits and businesses, opening up the heart, driving engagement, and making a difference, we're honored to be joined by two lovely ladies who are doing amazing good with SidebySide Solutions. They're the co-founders. We have Dominique, Jara, and also Caroline Jacobsson. So how are you two doing?
Very well. Thank you, Jeremy.
Thank you, Jeremy. Thank you so much for inviting us to be here. Really thrilled. It's going to be fun.
Absolutely. So when you talk about cityCURRENT and what you do, there's perfect synergy. So this is going to be an awesome conversation that I've been looking forward to. Talk, though, a little bit of history. Let's start with history so that people kind of understand the context, and then we'll dive into all the amazing good that you do. So give us a history lesson for SidebySide Solutions.
Sure. I'll start. I'm Caroline. So my background is with the nonprofit sector. I have over 15 years experience working with some of the most, respected and famous nonprofits in the world, Greenpeace, Oxfam, Amnesty, just to mention a few. And I've spent the last year in Nashville and ran into Dominique at the AMA, American Marketing Association, summer get-together last year. And that's where we hit it off.
And so give us a little bit of your background, Dominique, because you come from a corporate sector.
I do. I come from a different perspective. I've worked with large B2B and B2C companies. I've worked with, most recently was a director of marketing for a company that's the largest prescription lens manufacturer in the United States. And worked with marketing company, with efforts such as Sam's Club, Walmart, VisionWorks, insurance providers such as Kaiser Permanente, United Health. But then I met Caroline at this AMA. We were both volunteering, both started getting to talk about our backgrounds, and found that with both commonalities, but with a different perspective, we thought we could put something together like SidebySide Solutions, where we could do more than just our backgrounds as far as bringing both sides together, the mutual benefit of both. So this idea came out and it just sort of sprang from there.
So let's talk about what you all do, because I think, for basic context for listeners is, one, social impact is now mandatory. When you look at companies, consumers are making their purchasing decisions based on the social good efforts. 85% of millennials choose, their purchasing decisions based on that. That number is going up for all different age groups. We want to see that companies are giving back and making a difference. Also, employees are choosing where to go to work based on those efforts. They want to see that their time spent at work has a purpose. They want to feel like they're making a difference, and they want to have modified work schedules and opportunities to engage. So there's real power on both ends, and obviously the nonprofits need that engagement. So share a little bit of just kind of what you do, and then we'll dive into all the fun stuff, the questions you ask, and how you do it.
Sure. Well, we call ourselves a social enterprise consultancy, which means that we look at both sides of the table, basically. We look at the nonprofit side, we look at the company side, and specify their needs. What are their particular needs? And we focus on the fact that you can achieve more in the long term by creating partnerships that are mutually beneficial, and it can actually achieve change, but you need to have this long-term perspective and move away from the one-off giving and having a logo on the website and it looks all great, but what does it actually give? Like you said, Jeremy, what does it give to staff? Does it give to donors or to other kinds of stakeholders? So that was really the starting point of our business idea, and we saw that resonated in a number of sectors and with a number of actors here at home in Memphis, in Nashville, in Chattanooga, and other places in Nashville or in Tennessee. And certainly this is not only a US issue, it's also global, and that's where we have seen in our respective backgrounds in the company sector and in the nonprofit sector that this is indeed something that brings all of the nonprofits together and the companies.
Absolutely. Let's start by asking, what are the questions that you like to ask? So when you're sitting down with a company and you're trying to figure out what their purpose is, and some might not even know. So,
exactly.
Exactly. So we might have to backtrack even more, but talk about the questions you like to ask on the front end to start diving into figuring out what is their purpose and how do we align this?
I would I'm very passionate about purpose. Carolyn knows I can go drone on and on about it, but it's such a powerful tool. It's such a powerful reason. And I'll backtrack about what is a purpose. And so we talk with companies about that. We talk about if they have a purpose, because sometimes they have a misunderstanding of what it is, and they think it's their mission. I have a great mission. They get to work every day and they make more widgets, but it really is much more aspirational, much more inspiring to their customers, about their brand, to their employees, and it provides a call to action. It gets if an organization does it comprehensively, it provides a call to action, it provides direction, so that when they talk to their constituents, being their stakeholders, their partners, their customers, their employees, it really drives and focuses them on what they want to do, the reason to exist. So that's where we start to lay the groundwork, because a lot of companies, again, because of that misunderstanding, or they might have tried to go down to the purpose journey, but because they didn't do it comprehensively, maybe one department did it or one group did it, it didn't really work. They didn't see the positive impacts they could make.
Yeah.
So we start that first.
Yeah. Yeah, and I like to think about it too, is like you said, outside of the goods and services, what's the difference they're trying to make?
Yeah, and how do you measure it? You know, it has to be results oriented, and you have to show the results and the metrics that we base the partnerships on, which are all linked to the specific needs of both the company and the nonprofits. These are equal partners. They are mutually beneficial, the partnerships. It's not one giving to the other and one saying thank you and see ya. It's all about showing later on in the process what were the actual results to the owners, to the donors, to other beneficiaries. So that's a big part of the partnership creation.
Yeah, and carry that forward, because this is where like we could have an hour, 10-hour conversation on this kind of stuff. But I think it's so important is you're right. Like it's an investment. You're collaborating and working together. And so when you look at measuring, really important for nonprofits, obviously, to be able to show the results, but also too, business leaders are ROI driven. They want to know that their investment is making a difference. And so when you look at the ability to measure, if they see that it's working, they'll put more in because they know it's working. And so you do build this amazing synergistic opportunity where when you're measuring the outcomes and you're measuring the right outcomes and you see impact, then on both sides, you're able to make a difference, but you're also too getting even more buy-in because it's working. Share, when it comes to metrics, like, kind of some best tips, advice, what sort of just advice would you throw out there when it comes to grading success and looking at the measurements and the metrics?
First of all,
there's the growth.
Go ahead.
I'll just start with there's the growth perspective. Like you started saying, Jeremy, you have to show the numbers, and companies that have a defined purpose, they can see in their growth numbers that they're showing results thanks to their very clear purpose. But when we talk about, for instance, staff retention and the ability to recruit the resources that you need for the organization, then we also see that if you have a clear purpose and it's very that the staff care about, what is in it for me at the end of the day? Am I actually contributing to with all the time I spend in my workplace? What can I say was the actual outcome of it? This is how you retain and you attract the staff you need to move the organization forward.
And that begins with, that begins with benchmarking where you are today. So when you can benchmark on employee engagement, you can benchmark on customer engagement. You can do that through surveys. You can do that through customer loyalty scores. There's multiple ways that you can actually measure that and benchmark it at the beginning of the development of that journey to where you do it within a group. For example, if you were going to do it 6 months, a year, 2 years from now, and see that arc, see that trend as positive. So all those different, and you can also see it on the growth of their brand, both the reputation of their brand and also of the awareness of their brand. So there's multiple different ways depending, and we like to do it based on the company and the relevancy to the company. If they're looking for things that they find that their brand may not have the awareness out there or may not have the reputation out there to be a purpose-driven company, we can benchmark those metrics and make sure that we see that result. Because at the end of the day,
Yeah.
that long-term relationship with the nonprofit is going to be based on the results that they get at the end of the relationship to be able to do it
And if
again.
they don't have that benchmark, we can help them define it. If you don't have those measurements and those metrics in your organization, we can review the strategic documentation. We can help them specify what exactly is it we're going to be measuring here. What makes sense to you? It's always bespoke. It's never one, you know, the cookie cutter model is always bespoke and specific to that particular need.
Yeah, and I think that's the good and the good and the challenge is you can take benchmarks and best practices that apply, but at the same time, like you're saying, it's a bespoke, it's a customized solution for every company because every company is different.
Right.
Yeah, and also for the nonprofits.
Right. Right.
And it goes back to being comprehensive. It has to impact on the company side all the different constituents that they have that have relevance to the company, their customers, their employees, their stakeholders, their partners. It could also be their suppliers. And really evolutionary, it could also be innovation for them as well. So yeah, it's such an amazing tool once companies get into it that it could really change the way that they do business.
I think for listeners, we've touched on quite a few major trends that I think are really important to understand. One is we talked about just the power of purpose, and purpose really now, social impact is now mandatory. You look at marketing from that perspective, product, price, place, promotion, purpose is a big piece of that moving forward. Process, people, they've added some other ones. But then you get into, like we're talking about, this idea of ROI, measurement, coming alongside, partnering together. And I think partnerships is a big part of that. Another one that I look at is kind of the one-for-one model, where not necessarily the whole theory that that's good for every company, but the idea that you bake in the cost of giving back into every single transaction. So it could be a percentage of sale, it could be rounding up. There's many different ways, but that way you're not waiting until the end of the year to see, do I have any money left or not? It's actually baked into every single transaction, which is powerful for your employees. And it's also powerful for your company to be able to create a charitable coin bank that you can use to give. What's maybe one other major trend that you all kind of see on your end, or something that you think people need to know about, that this is something that from the philanthropic side, from the corporate engagement, the CSR side, this is something that's really important to know?
So we can do one each. So on the nonprofit side, one major trend, and that we heard in a recent meeting, was if I have another company coming to me to say, I'll paint your wall green, I will throw them and their paint buckets out, because it's not going to help me in my strategic planning for the next 5 years. My walls are good. You know, that's not what I need. I need resources. I need equipment. I need I need new ways of thinking about the programs that we're offering. I need to retain new types of skills. And that was a completely different, piece that the companies that this nonprofit was talking to, that they hadn't even thought about. They were just thinking about their own staff engagement and what they could do for their next Christmas party. So that's a big deal for many of even the big charities, the smaller ones that are used to taking whatever they can get, to the really large ones. And that's a trend that goes across the board.
Yeah. And I think, carrying that forward, just the idea of doing an asset inventory for companies. What do you have that you can use, whether it's conference rooms, camera equipment, anything? Those assets can be put to good use with nonprofits. And then to your point about expertise, what expertise does your team have? Not painting a wall, but I mean, like looking at development, operations, finance. How can you really engage and leverage the skill sets of your employees so that you're getting more out of it, but the nonprofit is getting a lot more out of it? Dominique, go ahead and carry that forward. What's a trend on your end?
Yeah, I was going to say that a lot of the large companies have the resources to be able to do this on their own. They, however, they're so large that their stakeholders, it takes longer for them to implement. Our focus has been with the small to mid-size companies, where they're nimble enough to make those decisions and get their stakeholders engaged, but they may not have the resources to do it. And so our uniqueness, I guess, in the marketplace is the fact that we want to become that resource for them to be able to do this themselves. And we do it in two different ways. We either do it for them and engage with them and partner with them to come up with the next nonprofit that may do well for them, or we also do training. So we can train them to do it themselves, and to try to get to that point where they go through the concepts, the development stage, the concept stage, and then they get into the presentation stage where they're working with a nonprofit they believe that has a mutual purpose. So it's a little bit different than most of the other companies that are out there today. Side-by-Side Solutions, we really want to look at not only what their purpose is and going through their purpose development journey, but also with the nonprofits that they're looking at too, to develop that long-term relationship. So that's where large companies do it without foundations and with the resources that they have. We become that resource for the mid-size and small company.
Outside of calling you all, because obviously that's where it really starts, but give us one step that you think companies need to take, one bit of advice, but one step that you think companies need to be taken to make that step forward. So in other words, what's something they can be thinking about or doing as a step forward based on your experience?
I think for the company, it needs to start in both ways. They need to listen. Their leadership needs to listen to their employees and their customers. They need to see what they need to make that engagement to be able to decide what their purpose is. It can't be just a one-off. It can't just be one person in the leadership position making those decisions. It really has to come, it can come from the bottom down, but it also needs to come from the bottom up. And that's where we say comprehensive, because if it's just one entity or one group, it's not going to get the maximum positive impact that it can. So I would say that engagement and that connection with their stakeholders and understanding what's important to them, what's relevant.
Caroline, what would you add to that?
I'll just add one more thing. It may not have anything to do with the widgets that they're manufacturing. It may be something completely different, but it's an offshoot of what they think is important. What gets them up in the world? What gets them up in the morning? What makes them feel good about the world?
Caroline, what would you add to that?
Well, I think many smaller nonprofits are struggling with showing how extremely well they're doing and utilizing the results that they're actually having and the major steps they're taking on their own with all the struggle they're going through and the lack of resources and funding, but actually using that in marketing or communications, PR, and bringing it to the next level. So that's definitely something where a company can be of assistance, and they can do it together, because normally a company would have more experience in the marketing world and having those proper in-house resources, and they don't really have to think about it. It's just done, because otherwise the business doesn't work. So that would be something that we have seen many times over the last year, where that would be an excellent starting step. And it's as in like the final part of our process is to look at what comes afterwards. Once we've got the partnership going, it's working, it's happening, how do we use that momentum? How do we use this in terms of internal and external communications, PR, marketing, to bring it to an even higher and better level?
Yeah, and I think when you look at your process, prepare, engage, communicate, you're exactly right. Like that's that last piece of it is communication. Let's end on that note is, when you talk about communication, I think it's vitally important on both sides, right? So it's important for the nonprofit to celebrate the corporate engagement, and it's important for the corporate side to talk about the nonprofit and that purpose, right? So on both ends, they do need each other from a storyline perspective. So give us maybe just, from your experience, where you like to kind of hone in on, or once again, a bit of advice, but take it a step further on the communicate side.
Carolyn, you want to start?
No.
She's
throwing it to you, Dominique.
Well, I'd probably be a little bit more tactical.
That's a pivot, Dominique. Just run with it.
Because I've been with companies that do it really well and not so well, and the companies that were very, as far as their aspiration, it was very internal, and so it did not have any. So the communications were very short-sighted and short-term, whereas the type of communications when you're looking out and connecting with your customers and with your staff, I think that becomes something of frequency. It tells them how important it is, and keeps that communication open so that going forward, when we go through this again and when we see that the purpose has worked for the company and for the nonprofit, you want to do it again, because you're always engaging with the stakeholders. You're always getting their feedback and making sure that you're telling them what was happening. I think that's so important.
And I think a nonprofit is they're already on to the next fire they have to extinguish. They haven't even thought about, they've solved the problem, they're done, they're good, but they haven't thought about what can we do with this result? What can we do with this achievement? Because they're already on to the next thing that they have to fix before the year is over and the money has run out. So I think that would be.
And that communication also, you just mentioned the money running out. That communication helps to the return on investment we just talked for a company to engage them again. If it's working and we've communicated it and we've seen the increase, the ROI that we have, we're going to go, a company's going to do it again. It's just a positive result.
Yep. Yeah. People like supporting a winning team.
Yes.
They like seeing that it's working. Go ahead and wrap up, because this is something obviously that we'll have to have you come back and do a lot more of these, even virtual versions, just because this is, I think, such an important topic, but it's also too one that is really helpful to steer people in the right direction. So go ahead and tell them where they can connect in: website, social media, phone number. How do we reach out to you and carry this conversation forward?
I'm going to throw it to you this time, Caroline.
It's SidebySideSolution.co. That's us, and Caroline and Dominique. You can also find us on LinkedIn. We have our own group where we bring in potential partners. And at the moment, we could actually flag that we have 3 main sectors that are dominating our group. This is education on all levels. So we have worked with Princeton on the high level, and kindergartens on, starting the younger students. We have healthcare as the second sector that is very strong, and the third one is IT and innovation. So those 3 sectors have been the loudest so far.
Nice. SidebySideSolution.co is the website, so make sure everyone check them out. But Dominique, Caroline, thank you for all you do and for coming on the show. Greatly appreciate it.
Thanks, Jeremy.
Thanks so much,
Appreciate
Jeremy.
it. Thank you.